Welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. We're really excited about kind of hive minding or hyphae minding, in particular resilience together. And I wanted to start by acknowledging what a privilege it's been over the last decade to be working on what would have been the floodplain of the Gabrielino Keach Tongva people here. So this site was once kind of ground zero on a day like today for some pretty wild action happening. Because when it would rain, it would flood here for sure. The Glendale, what we call the Glendale Narrows now, where the water kind of narrows, would be where things would build up, and as stuff would build up, it would finally explode, and this area would get crazy. And when it got crazy, later, the decay would happen, and this would have been a place of incredible abundance. So when we started working here, our guiding question was, how can we make a tow yard back into a floodplain again? And that was 10 years ago, when this used to be the infamous tow yard that O.J. Simpson's Bronco was towed into. And for any of you who grew up during the punk rock days like me, my car was towed here regularly. So I used to know this spot a lot. But we're here today for a kind of another reason, which is also a kind of way of thinking about speculative ecologies. If the generative principle of a site like this was floods and landslides, and if it was a good idea in the 1930s to protect ourselves from damage of those floods and landslides, then what can we do with the generative principle of what makes Southern California abundant? Given that it doesn't make sense with all the precarity around climate change to unbuild a flood control measure, but how can we reimagine what we can do? So we're coming together today around climate resilience, specifically after 2 months ago's firestorms and what we're still living with as a result of that firestorm, and full awareness that when Mike Davis wrote The Ecology of Fear in 1998 and predicted what unchecked urbanism into the canyons would look like in relationship to fire, and what kinds of fire and water systems we have put together, the firestorm we had 2 months ago is more the norm than it is the one-off. Maybe the scale was different, but there's no reason to think that that's a situation that's over. So back in April of last year, we started to think, well, what if we thought about landslide debris differently? Instead of thinking about it as detritus that just needs to get moved off the road so we can regain our mobility, what if we thought about it as like the building blocks for places that need good soil? Because it is the ultimate, a lot of the mountain slides are the kind of ultimate beginning for regenerative thinking. So we started to work with flow trucking, and Kristen will be here soon. How that happened was she was the winning contractor with Caltrans to get Route 27 in Topanga cleared after months and months of that soil just sitting on the road. And she bids for a job through kind of guesswork. She has to figure out how many truckloads she's going to have to move and where it's going to need to go, and bid on the job so that her bid is better than other bids. but there's always a level of uncertainty. And part of that uncertainty is how much a laydown yard charges for you to deposit debris, and the average is about $100. So what you're looking at on this site in several locations is about 100 truckloads of Topanga landslide soil in full bloom. So if you look out the window there, you're looking at what we call the mother mound. That's about 75 truckloads. And what's in front of that is about 10 truckloads that used to be in a hoop house during the time that we were terrified that nothing would bloom. So we were at first like, what if we bring all of this over here and nothing happens, right? And Diego's like, don't worry, I'm a biologist. I promise you something will happen. And we're like, well, what if it doesn't? Let's just be sure that we try everything. So we had that area covered, and later on, we'll describe to you what's going on there. With the green hoop house over there, we have 3 truckloads. And then in another circle at the edge, we have about 25 truckloads. So they're different sizes here, and we'll tell you all about that. But I wanted to, before we get into it, I wanted to talk about the principles of why we wanted to have you here, which is that our decision to engage with Kristen to give a free laydown yard was good economics for her, because it saved her from paying 100 truckloads per load. She and her family also grew up in Monterey Park, and she knew that there wasn't a lot of places with good healthy soil on this side of town, so she was motivated to do it, and the only requirement was that I couldn't say anything. Right? So the problem of being a unicorn in this is that if you want to see a protocol change, you do need to have a proof of concept, and you need enough of us to do it that you can start to create a protocol shift. And we believe that this is just a good idea, right? It's just a good idea to use landslides in a place that will always have them to help us repair. So because I'm in a bit of a crash course on understanding climate resilience, I wanted to explain the informational graphic that I've put up here in relationship to big picture thinking and protocol change. Metabolic Studio's Moving Mountains is an applied research project that reimagines urban and rural landscapes as regenerative systems rather than static infrastructures. This work is located and rooted in the logic of geological movement, hydrological repair, and fire-adaptive landscapes, responding to the urgency of climate-driven disasters, particularly wildfires and land degradation. So in this graphic, you'll see the tiny little red pupil in the middle of those targets. That is the property level of resilience. That in terms of what we're living through, when we hear about properties in relationship to the overall fires, that tiny little red dot is what we're talking about. So moving mountains begins at this material scale, because working with soil, sediment, and debris from that more ochre-colored area, from landslides and fire-damaged areas that were not urban, we can integrate into that tiny red dot biochar, mycelial remediation, and permeable groundscapes to create fire-resilient topographies that prevent soil erosion and regenerate burned terrain. And that's simply by moving the soil on top, right? That's before you start hiring experts to do anything. The reason we think that is because nothing would be blooming if there wasn't bacteria's yeast and fungal networks already in that soil to make that happen. So this tow yard at Metabolic Studio serves as an experimental proof of concept for you all to look at. Now, it will be different where you move it, because you'll have different pollinators, probably not that different, but it'll be slightly different So if you look at the orange band, or the kind of orangey ochre band, that is the community scale fire breaks that we think need to go in. So we're looking at advocating for a 5-mile novel easement around the urban zones. That would be, our dream would be that it would be a public-private partnership with tribal leadership in charge. So it would be a TEK laboratory for us to put back in controlled burns with tribal people at the forefront of that, as well as livestock zones. So that orange zone is the zone of moving mountains. That's where the mountains are slipping after a burn that we're collecting from. So moving mountains extends into urban lots and foothill corridors, implementing fire adaptive plantings, water infiltration zones, and sediment reallocation to redirect fire behavior and reduce fuel loads. The project aligns with indigenous fire stewardship practices, working with prescribed burns, advocates for TEK practitioners to ensure controlled burns function as regenerative rather than destructive forces. And lastly, that massive green circle, that's a watershed-wide resilience diagram, because no permanent solution to the problems of these wildfires can happen without us looking at the big picture. So that's moving into federal land some of the time, BLM land, but it also includes some state park land like we have in the Santa Monica Mountains, as well as nonprofit land like, Santa Monica Conservancy and stuff like that. That's about a 75 square mile area that we're talking about. So Moving Mountains considers the Los Angeles Basin's watershed as a whole, understanding that fire, flood, and sediment cycles are interconnected. By returning water to its historical pathways, we readdress fire at its source, a desiccated landscape unable to regulate temperature, retain moisture, or sustain biodiversity. Through soil and debris redistribution, we rebuild watershed health, restoring habitat corridors, and creating large-scale ecological buffers that slow down wildfires before they reach urban centers. We are advocating in our petition that we shift from fire suppression, which is largely a militarized thing that we've been seeing, into fire adaptation, which is community-driven and centered around tribal people. So Moving Mountains rejects reactive fire suppression in favor of adaptive design, using land's natural cycles of movement, deposition, and regrowth to create a fire adaptive region. This approach reorients land use policies and challenges the real estate driven logic that has made Southern California a fire-prone landscape. The project demands new infrastructural imaginaries where fire, water, and land are seen as cooperative forces rather than elements to be controlled or suppressed. So I wanted to introduce the concepts with you before we introduce ourselves. I'll let Kelly kind of take over from that, because you're our dream team. Everybody here is doing amazing work. What we're advocating and bringing people together for is so that Kristen, our hero in the story, has places that she can come and take this soil, right? Because it's now. We need to move it now. And that from where we move it, we can figure out how we cultivate it, how we advocate for it, how we can move beyond it. So I wanted to at least introduce the concepts of what we're working with and why we're doing it, and apologize in advance for a prior commitment I have on Zoom with the city, who's asking me to sit on a board on public art and regeneration. So I'll be telling the same story. to them, we're all thinking about the same things, which is great, right? But I'll be able to stay for another few minutes, but I wanted to at least give you a big picture. This is me and ChatGPT last night, by the way. So please excuse the fact that it's not the greatest diagram in the world, but sometimes it's helpful to have some kind of infographic that talks about, really the red dot is all we're hearing about, right? When we hear about climate resilience, that's all we're hearing about. But I think we're operating here on moving mountains, at least in that golden area. And we're trying to talk big picture by also calling in that we need to be thinking about the big green. But the area that we're wanting to focus on all of you today is that golden and that red interface.
So I'm Kelly, which most of you I've already met in the past. So a lot of what I do here in regards to this discussion is I spoke a lot last year with Kristen, and kind of we co-organized how to get this material here and how to do this kind of bigger picture moving around mountains, right? Whether it be from the governing bodies or with Kristen and her team, or the soil tests, or all the things that kind of came through that, which we can talk about more in detail. But also a lot of what I do is project management, bending the river, and meandros, which is connected to this. But a lot of what I do is trying to help make things happen through the systems that we have in place that don't want these things to happen. So really excited to have everybody here so we can find new ways to kind of create these cyborg watersheds, which I don't know if Lauren just talked about, but this idea of living with what we have created for ourselves and kind of finding the new ways to adapt for the future, and kind of circumventing and hopefully changing policy, but also moving these things forward within what we have now in a fast timeline. So that's that.
Yeah. So I'm Mary Ferguson. I'm with LA County Parks in Sustainability Planning. And this is really interesting because I actually did a thesis years ago on sediment removal from San Diego Mountains, and just talking about how the flood control system, does a really great job at moving water out, but has created a lot of other issues around it. Most sort of important being sediment and beach replenishment and everything else along the way. And so it's really, really interesting to hear about this concept. And also, timely, I just lost my home in the Eaton fire in Altadena, so just trying to reimagine how rebuilding could happen. When it's very likely that the same scenario could, or at least depending on how things are rebuilt, it could easily happen again in years' time. So, really happy to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Brianna Dawson. I work with Mary in planning and development at Parks and Rec. I'm a sustainability planner, and I just started a day before the fires.
Oh God.
So first couple weeks I was working at Care Camp at Descanso Gardens. A lot of the work now is very much about fire recovery, and it's a very interesting time because on the one hand, the fires are bringing the climate emergency to the fore as an emergency, and so there's quite a bit of opportunity in that sense to do things and do them now. But then, of course, on the other side, there's the difficulty of, even just on a financial level, let alone, everything else and what we're facing. But very excited to be here with you all.
I'm Sasha Anemone. I work with Alan at SALT, Landscape Architects. Something that I'm really passionate about and have been involved in some research efforts over the last couple of years is just pushing the design and construction industries towards more responsible carbon practices. And a lot of that tends to be revolving around material choices in design, but I also think that this is such a huge piece of it, is plugging into the material flows of the region and figuring out how that becomes the new things that we're building. I found it so inspiring and generative to see the undevelopment tours a few months ago, so I'm really excited to learn more and participate in this conversation.
I'm Alan Compton, founder of Salt Landscape Architects, and I'm excited to be here. We have been very interested in the opportunities that this fire has presented, the challenges as well. As landscape architects, we've been really focused on open space, and in particular parks, as, in our perspective, a linchpin in resilience. I mean, as you sort of drive through Altadena, all of the sort of monochromatic burn scenarios, and then you reach a park which really is green still. There's something really kind of telling about this as an opportunity for new beginnings. I think it's also a place where community can come back sooner for events, and I've also been really interested in how art practices can be the beginning of bringing people back. So whether it's with soil, whether it's with performance, whether it's with installations, I think these are all opportunities to bring community back, to begin finding footing again. So thanks for allowing me.
My name is Mary McGilvray. I had lived up in the National Forest above Altadena for 26 years secretly, and came down to the Altadena Community Garden, which started in 1972. So it's about 57 years old, and I've been on the board for 20 years. So we have new fresh blood here, and so we're very, very excited to be part of this whole transitions that's taking place. I've been very involved in the urban wildland interface for a long time, so this is really critical to see this happen. Very appreciative.
Hi, I'm Joe Nagy. I'm the current president of the Altadena Community Garden. My second year, Altadena burned down, so challenges ahead, but exciting opportunities to rebuild and rebuild better. And I think a big focus of us is, you know, the ecosystem and the relationship between people and plants, and rebuilding and educating people on that relationship. And hopefully there's an infrastructure for better water use in there, and hopefully we have some professionals on that, because the redistribution of the intelligent distribution of water and plant life will prevent these things in the future and give us a more abundant life. So that's what we're working on. Thank you all for having us, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, hi everyone. I'm so sorry I was late. As I was 10 minutes late, I then received a phone call from our soil scientist, Global Environmental, about this recent testing, and just to make sure that I understood exactly what we're hauling. We always make sure before we haul anything we completely understand everything about the soil. But I had the honor of meeting Metabolic Studios last year with Topanga Canyon landslide. They were our secret weapon, and it started, as a great relationship. Where now, unfortunately, but fortunately for, it's sad to say, but for our business, we've received this new remediation contract. Our intention is to, uphold our commitment to not allowing any of the soil, the good soil, go to any landfill or dump site. Last landslide, we're proud to say that soil is either sent here or sent to farmers out in Camarillo, which we anticipate this go around as well. And this go around will be a lot more soil, and as well as burnt charcoal debris. So we have a lot of that as well. But I'm here for any questions or however we can support. I also have a co-owner, my brother Gregory, who if I'm not around, he's usually around. So I have to give him his credit.
Hi there, my name is Megan Horn. I'm a principal at Studio MLA, Landscape Architecture and Urban Design Practice, just around the corner. I have as well as landscape architecture, my background with degrees in geography, and so I feel like I'm very more comfortable at the community or watershed scale than necessarily the parcel scale. So that's something that we both bring to our work. Since the fires, I've been really diving in I learned a lot about forest management and fire management in my degree in geography, but much more for a forest environment and not our chaparral coastal safe scrub. So since the fires, I've really just been diving into any and all research, webinars, podcasts, YouTubes I can find to really understand why our climate and vegetation is so unique in terms of this fire regime.
I appreciate the convening, and some of us have seen each other at other convenings already, and there seems to be a generosity of spirit among people in our in our cohort, and with a tremendous interest in the environment, and of course urban forests and forests in general, and let's not forget the creatures because they need us right now more than ever. We as a firm have been working on small, large-scale projects and are working on Eaton Canyon with the county. So we were on that famous as needed list, and so we're getting started. And we went on the walk with the community. I mean, with the docents. That was very powerful and emotional for everybody to walk through and see really what they had not seen the damage to the building yet at that point. So there's just so much going on. I also happen to sit on the Department of Water and Power, so that's all very confusing. I grew up in Central America, in El Salvador. My father founded a tree people organization, and then went on to become ambassador of Central America to Israel, where he learned all about irrigation before everybody else was doing irrigation in the way Israel originally did it. And so I have all these spokes around me, and I'm just, I think I was talking to another one of our friends about how we need to, really work on a mind map, because there's so much going on now, and
So much
positive energy. So how do we connect people? I had lunch with Carol Armstrong, some of you know, sends regards, from the LA Zoo, and they're in desperate need of support. So, just in terms of how we manage, the site and, the opportunities that there are, and making sure that the place is holding tight and well.
Thank you all for coming. Such an exciting group of people and backgrounds. And so I think with what Lauren had said and presented, what we're kind of bringing everybody here today to think about, like, where can we do laydown yards for this soil? Kristen's desperately trying to get rid of, but not into a dump. So we're trying to brainstorm today about what could be some laydown yards. Also, if there's sites, I know you guys we've been talking about getting you some soil, so then we can also kind of brainstorm particulars of, like, we had somebody here earlier today, it's like, is San Bernardino too far? So I think there's a lot of questions that people have about potentially how far, how much or how little can we take, what does that soil testing look like? I think there's a lot of big picture questions that we can, like, talk through. But I think maybe before it just started. Okay, I think we should do a little spin. We have some big umbrellas. If everyone's cool with a short spin around, we'll stay on the asphalt, so we won't give you the full force tour, but that'll give us more time to come back and chat. We'll just go and look at the Mother Mound and C7 and some of the other aspects of the Moving Mountains project, and then we'll come back and it'll be fun. If you don't want to, you can hang out at the heat lamp. Oh yes, and are there any questions right away?
How much soil is there?
Good question. To date, we've hauled about 7,000 cubic yards. There is an anticipated additional 33,000. With this rain, it changes weekly due to how often we're having rain events, and if this rain event is truly the size that they say it is tonight, we'll see what comes down tomorrow.
And it's all dirt from Topanga?
Topanga Canyon.
Yeah.
So there's about it's from PCH up to Grandview, which is where the landslide happened, last time. And except with the landslide, it was centralized in one location where the landslide was. There's due to the fire, there's so much loose material, and now that the rain is happening, all that loose material is now coming to the road. So we're just consistently testing, and I do know, I know this community is small, so I'm sure, some, test results get around. So test results, we try to, it's now become a, we are strategic about how we test and where we test. And so say we have a piece of equipment moving soil from the road so that emergency vehicles then can make their way through the road. Well then, if that soil is tested immediately, then they have certain, they, from right, yeah. So then, is that a true sample? Well then we have to resample. So if anything like that comes up, we resample, is what we've learned. And regarding telephone poles as well, right? Telephone poles burnt, and then all of a sudden they went back up, and now they're being buried. So it, that affects the soil as well, is what we're learning. So if there's any questions about test results or anything, we can always resample. Our soil scientist is a true, advocate for us. She believes none of the soil, it's truly just coming from on top. So it really has been untouched. There's no residential. We've checked where they sprayed fire retard, yes, and with none of it is in that area.
Does anybody have any other big picture questions before we?
Anyone forgot an umbrella? We have some
We have
extras.
some golf umbrellas, so they should cover us.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's go. Alice.
Have an extra one.
The Loma Alta Park North Gymnasium, just to the east of it, is a phase of the La Viña housing development that never happened. And it's a huge, flat, windy, horrible area that needs something.
Okay. Say it.
La Viña,
Sorry.
it's the La Viña development. Close enough.
I'm the worst speller. I really shouldn't be in charge of the marker and the board.
LA space VINA.
You're already up there.
And that's the Loma.
Loma Alta Park, just east. Loma Alta Park.
And who owns that? Do you know?
You mean the county owns the park, but the
Well, but this is-
development.
Eli Road, maybe,
Oh,
or Edgar Bronfman.
Okay. Put it as a question.
Do folks have any initial reactions to moving mountains? Yeah.
My question would be like, has there been concern or has anyone looked into like the amount of emissions plus like traveling to from Topanga and how that might?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. So last go around, the carbon footprint is a concern always. So what happened is, the state is, get everything as quick as you can off so we can open the road, which the carbon footprint actually helped us. That's why we hauled at night. so less traffic. However, is the carbon footprint less than taking the detrimental, damage of taking it to a landfill? Because if the carbon footprint has that much of an issue or is that much pressed, then it's just stays in landfill. So, we would have to navigate like connectivity and the right times, but I would say.
But when it goes to the landfill, it does have some value, doesn't it?
If it's at the top of the landfill, so for example, like Shoal Canyon, who they're at their capacity, they should pay us for this for the soil because it would benefit. It'd be their cap. If it's like then getting repressed by other fire debris from the houses, and I don't think it would.
Is there a distance right now that you guys kind of rough? Obviously, it depends on lots of factors, but
I would say the Ian Canyon area, and they'll say like an hour drive time max.
Where's the biggest long-term need for soil? Is it, is going to be at the parcel level, or there are upcoming projects? That's I'm trying to add that to the matrix calculus.
Whole block would be nice.
Yeah.
Like a whole block. So
you mean as a laydown yard?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it has to be cleaned first, or scraped first, right?
Nuccio's nursery,
Yeah.
which is up, it's up Cheney Trail. It's very close to where I'm talking about. It's a nursery that's for sale.
I don't actually know. I'm gonna guess.
Close enough.
It's Italian. N-U-C-I-O.
Oh!
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, there you go.
What?
Do you have any contacts with them? Do you know them?
I was just involved in a big fight to save the nursery that was being purchased by a very exclusive private school that wanted to put a sports complex up there. So there's a process, they just fell out of escrow with that. So I think they're still on the market to be sold, but we're trying to turn it into a conservation, regional resource kind of thing.
And that's something we could talk about on our end too, because we've been looking at Lucio's nursery and wanting to get in touch with them, but we've been needing to figure out internally if there is already movement, which we think there might be at the county, looking at, I don't know if it's an acquisition or leasing, but we're interested. I think you had a conversation with Norma about that, so I don't know enough.
Yeah.
So I can put us in contact with the leader of the main group that fought and is coordinating all of this for an organization called Altadena Wild. And he and his wife, Michael, stayed in my house as evacuees, and they're wonderful people. We can hook this all up.
Okay. Altadena Wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really
Very.
Stephanie Langer's on it.
Sorry?
She's Altadena Green.
That's who I thought. Do you mean Altadena Green?
No.
This is the
Yeah.
Look at this.
Wild green. They need to be together.
No.
Okay.
Keep us there.
I'm gonna put the both on here.
So, I think if Oakland is looking for a location for this office to go, there's probably gonna be ways to find it. You could say the piggy backyard, we just established a relationship with Union Pacific. And a colleague from Harvard who studied planning and then went to work to EPA, moved to San Francisco and started a company that moves within the Bay Area, dirty soil, if you can call it that, to some caverns in some northern states that were originally sort of excavated. My understanding was around the atomic bomb. Like that's where some people were going to say first, down inside of the cabin. Now they take dirty soil, and this fellow leases basically the rail, and that's where, I tried to tell the story to the river master planning people, but they would have nothing. Every time they did a cost, it was about the soil, either getting remediated somehow, but also getting going to shore or other lands. And instead, there's options.
Yeah.
He was just down here.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
David Gabbard was just down at our office meeting for 4 days.
Yeah.
And they are finding ways to actually use some of the new yards for removal and export. Don't know where it's going. Maybe you can explain.
I think we want to. Yeah, that's amazing.
But sites
I think
like
we
the
want.
backyard or like old rail areas that they want to transform, but haven't been able to because the soil's too toxic to
Right.
put it there.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing of like putting this soil on a toxic site is probably not what we want to
I think it could be a part of the remediation.
Yeah, if they were gonna keep it, that would be awesome. I know when we originally had talked last year when we had the Topanga soil and we were trying to like desperately find places, we had spoken with somebody about maybe it was the Weintraub about Taylor Yards,
Yeah.
and they were like, we can't put soil on top of that site, right, without having it fully contained. And so that was kind of the issue, like you're gonna toxify the soil. So that's the hope is like we could find, other kind of not that level of toxics. But as we move forward, right, and we know that more landslides are gonna exist, we should be thinking of like those types of spaces. But I think because of the immediate need, finding other locations probably makes sense.
Well, that's one of the, to me, when you pose your initial question about what's the long-term need for soil, that is certainly one of them. Like all the large-scale remediation projects across the city, unfortunately, most remediation exports contaminated soil and they bring in clean soil. We have problems with that. I'm not going to go into it, but the part that's importing clean soil is a huge need. And the best solution to all of this would be that we find a large laydown yard where we can bank the soil for later use when Taylor Yards or another county park is ready to receive that soil. Or for like individual people to take that soil bit by bit. But that's one of the main things that we're looking for is where can
And
we
it's
put
like
this
whose
soil?
responsibility would that be once it goes somewhere?
You mean
Like
once
if I have a yard and I'm like, I'll take some soil, is it just to stage it there for a little while, or is it to then figure out what to do with it?
You as like a property owner?
Yeah, do I become
The
the
state would never
owner?
allow us to take it to like an individual's house. It would have to, like, our contracts have to be with a organization, a reputable organization.
And then the organization can
right, so if somebody
Right.
takes it as a laydown yard, then that laydown yard would be, whoever owns that is then kind of, we need to work out that that needs to be worked out for sure.
There's also a huge issue right now with the illegal dumping or hauling. I'm sure the city's aware. It's like the wild, wild west out there just because everyone is hauling all day long. And we have, there's so many different haulers, and so we also have to think of the negative side of things, just so you're prepared and bringing hauling into an area if it's not there's insecurity or if it's not washed consistently, you have illegal dumping, which is a solution.
What about like someone like LA Compost that has a series of like little depots all over to take parts of it?
Well, I think, in order for, and I'm not gonna, I'm going to speak for you, but then please correct correct me. In order for it to make sense at this point, at the scale of the material that Kristen's moving, it has to be big enough, right? A big enough site or a big enough location, but I could see where that would be the laydown yard, and then something is figured out for their smaller, like I haven't been to most of LA compost spaces, but
Yeah.
they usually are within community gardens, right? So
Or
it's-
park spaces.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, they'd be a great, and we do work with them. We actually get a lot of their compost that we put into
Yeah.
our compost. So I think that is a definitely a group we want to
If
talk
they
to
give
about
compost to
this.
the community, they could also be giving healthy soil.
100%. And we've talked about this being a resource area too. And
Yeah.
that is part of some of the other initiatives we're doing. But again, the scale of the soil is bigger than what we can do here. So it's definitely bigger than what they can do at this point. We need like a middle. So these are all amazing questions though, because we've been just kind of chatting and
Yeah.
trying to help and trying to figure out where we could do it. But I think there isn't one solution. There's multiple solutions. But the idea, yeah, what about the bigger carbon footprint? And yeah, how do we distribute it on a smaller level? Are good things that we need to talk
I
through.
think this question about where is also tied to how long, because, you know, is it in perpetuity that the soil's gonna sit here until the final truckload is gone? Or it, you know, is the lease on the land for the soil gonna be for a year or 2 years, you know, like how's that gonna work?
I think it's case by case
Yeah.
basis, right? Because I think when we've been talking, started the conversation with the Altadena Community Garden, and we would ideally, what we've talked about is we would take it to you, and then that would be there forever, right? And like, so it depends on the site. So if we have a project that's big enough to take the soil, that's theirs for as long as they want it, or we find laydown yards, knowing that so many people in Altadena are gonna need it, that we probably won't have it for very long. But again, it's a new process and we're just trying to forge all the way, so these are amazing questions that we've been kind of.
So one other idea is like with around the fires, I know there's a few community groups. There's like one group in neighborhood in in Altadena and Palisades that they're looking at like the community scale redevelopment and planning, in which case it would get you out of the parcel scale, and if there's any sort of like cleaning of the soil or laying down, it could be like on a multi-block level because they're organizing that way.
Yeah, there is a community in Altadena that, they just discovered that 20 homeowners actually own like the 50 acres and even all the roads and utilities. So that should make it, you know, only one home remained of the front.
What are you talking about? What is it called? What is it? It's an organization?
It's like a neighborhood that they come together.
Yeah.
I have the names written down.
James
in the
Village?
office.
So Brad Quinn is the name of the architect. I happen to live there.
Okay.
Who's someone I know, who is the only one whose house did not go down, which is really weird. But you know, the rest of the homes, it turns out, are in a, you know, the road. He went to look into it, and all the utilities and the roads property is owned by everybody. They're not owned.
So it's privately
It's a
held.
private road.
It's privately owned.
Holly?
So it should make it a whole lot easier on many levels, you know.
Great.
But, you know, a lot of people who live around here, they're just all, one of the major things they're going through is insurance. It's
When you guys are thinking about Eden Canyon for the soil and the Equestrian Center, what are we
see in the larger natural area.
Right.
And then in the long term, it could influence the restoration of the canyon.
Right. Do we have any sense of how much? Do you have a sense of the amount of space and the amount, like any ballpark figure?
Not off the top of my head, but I could
Okay.
do a calculation.
Right.
Like, I don't know, you put 18 inches on top of it, and you could probably grow a lot.
Yeah.
It's for a whole equestrian, it's like definitely the size of a couple parking lots.
So I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but the other thing we're looking at as we start talking about these nurseries was Marshall Canyon Regional Park, and so I mean this is so early, but it's like tree people's potentially interested in having a location out there to have a kind of on that whole side of the county nursery. We don't know if it makes sense for a nursery for the Altadena area, but I guess I'd be kind of curious as things move a little bit further along the next couple of weeks, just like even for them, like is there a use for soil in terms of what they need for the actual staging of their nursery or the replanting they do all over the county?
Tree People was here this morning and we have a discussion specifically about Marshall Canyon Park.
Okay.
And other locations like in San Bernardino and just along the 210 freeway.
Okay.
It's just, they're gonna circle back and see if they have permission for us to take some of that soil. Because they are in that conversation about soil making, Tree People is. They're in the
Yeah.
concept.
Right.
But now that they see that there's an opportunity for us to take the soil, they're like, wait, this is a great opportunity.
Right.
We have laydown yards, we have property, we have the initiative to start these nurseries.
Right.
And to plant these trees.
Yeah. So it's interesting because we're kind of potentially involved in like 3 or 4 of these. So yeah, it's very
You are our connector for a lot. Well, also this morning somebody at the different tour, which is more about the columns and the art piece, which will include you guys all in as well. But this is more about how to move the mountains and how to actually triage. Somebody was asking what's happening with. Obviously, we're working with Kristen because we have this existing relationship and want to move that soil. But somebody was asking about all the soil that's coming down. The St. Gabriel's and like who is doing the hauling that soil and where's that going? And so if you have any idea about that, and not to put you on the spot, obviously about it, but it's like
Probably public works that's handling that.
yeah.
So that can be a conversation that we can have with them. Another potential area for a laydown yard is also in Altadena, is there's this area on the southwest end of Farnsworth Park that was never developed as part of the park. You know, I don't know if that's.
It's on the corner of Marengo and Concha, and it's an empty lot they've been trying to either turn it into tennis courts or another community garden.
Right.
But
it's hasn't. Yeah.
Nothing's happened because the neighbors have fought everything.
Yeah. So I mean that, potentially as a site, in terms of
I wonder if now, given the
Situation.
what's happened,
Yeah.
and then being able to talk about the regeneration of a place and bringing community together, to gather the soil and take it, that doesn't even have to stay there, right? But it could be kickoff to something else.
I know that, a few places, maybe Zortian Ranch could hold some. I know there's southern part of it didn't get hit by the fires.
Yeah.
The northern part did. But there's
Yeah.
there's a few plots on the southern part.
Yeah.
That get hit. Also, I know LA City Sanitation is a massive facility. I don't know if they have room because a lot of times they don't have enough soil to redistribute. So they have a really large plot where they move all their trucks and materials around that could potentially store some.
Yeah,
require projects to use recycled building material. Why not require it?
Yeah, landslide, we did take some of the soil to some of their like turnouts in Nagy Canyon, just because it was so
Yeah.
close to those mountains.
But they could then use it for their projects or it's for, that are built by other contractors.
Yeah.
There's room around the Hahamonga watershed area too. I don't know. Are you guys involved in that with the city of Pasadena?
No, but I'm familiar.
But what?
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah. There's some empty land of where the National Forest headquarters used to sit. That's just
Yeah.
devastated and
Yeah.
awful and needs to be used for something.
It seems just again from a carbon footprint perspective, that is there a place in the valley? Right, I mean, that's so much
Yeah.
closer.
Yeah.
It's hard to see driving from Topanga to the Zorthian Ranch making sense
Yeah.
for Topanga soil.
Like every
Yeah.
Christmas tree lot, and then a soil lot.
Or on the west side, I mean, I'm thinking about, like, I'm not sure what's going on with, like, Will Rogers and Temescal, but there may be some things that could be plugged in there, or, any of the community gardens on the west side, like, I know, I'm not sure exactly what the status is right now, but as of, like, about a year ago, the Santa Monica Community Garden Consortium was trying to add, like, just build a new garden, and I don't think it's been built yet, so if they're trying to build a garden from the ground up, that could be a lot of soil.
Yeah, Santa Monica Airport too, because there would be engaged with that property.
Probably a long
They have
time
some-
frame though, right?
This is the big question.
Yeah.
Timelines.
Well, I mean, not all these people. If one of these takes the soil, that would be great. But this also thinking future, right? And thinking we're gonna keep contending with this every year. Like we did last year, and we know what's coming, but we got on to other things, and so like now it's like, oh, let's relook at this. And the sites aren't always gonna be the same, but whatever connections we make with people will be. And yeah, and this is also to say you guys have lots of great ideas and hopefully contacts with some of these people to kind of help spread this message and this word. And I Tree People is working on a similar soil banking idea. So, they came today and was like, oh yeah, let's figure out how to like join these forces, because there are a lot of people doing starting to think like this, and so now it's like we'll build in the bones.
We're not talking to large landscape contractors that are
They're on
soil
a
constantly.
The private, I don't know, just legally, I don't know if that would be safe and sound for our contract, because we're engaging with another private entity.
Yeah.
So, in the
And then the-
perfect world, it would be Will Rogers, we're gonna have soil bank, and then carbon footprint isn't an issue, and we can just keep running trucks. Just so everyone understands like what it's like today, we have about 25 super 10s. We're only allowed to haul the super 10s because of the canyon and the road stability of the road. And they have about 3 loads a day. So that's what we're hauling per day. When we haul at night, it's sometimes more. When we were hauling here, we had a lot of predictivity because it was at night without traffic. Nighttime haul is always more dangerous, so that's why we have that, and we have to keep that in mind as well. Although it's like get everything out as quick as you can and have not as much of a carbon footprint. Well, then you have more tired drivers on the road hauling very heavy equipment. The probability is just high, right? So we take that into account. What I have to manage is time, right? So we're only as good as how fast we can move material, and with that, we always take into account where we're hauling. Out of all these locations, maybe identify what could be who can be the next 3 locations that could be within the next month. That would be fantastic. If not, we'll just keep calling to Camarillo. Camarillo's not a bad deal, for both the state and us, because it's an hour away time is of the essence, so this is gonna take 6 months and it probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I could suggest for Will Rogers, there is a new task for fire recovery task force being set up by the city of Los Angeles to focus specifically on the Palisades fire, because as a county, we tend to focus, these
Yeah.
are all our properties, we're
Yeah.
not getting for
Yeah.
But so there is a new task force that will be meeting weekly, that's just getting going, that's
Yeah.
focusing on the Palisades fire, so I feel like that would be a good place to just start to plug in and
Yeah.
say, is this needed, is this helpful, is anyone interested? I mean, the west side is such a different beast in
Yeah.
terms of what they're willing to do and interested in doing, but I
Yeah,
think-
if you have those contacts that you can put us in
Yeah.
touch with,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
Okay.
And I think just, I know that it's like getting to almost time. So I wanted to, we were gonna talk a little bit more about the community garden, because I think the next step was, can we do this at the community garden? And what would you need to be able to do that, right? Like, we need to know how much you would need so that Kristen can figure out how to get that there and if that can pencil out, right? And then, yeah, like the soil sampling, which we have tests from the last one, but like, what are questions you guys have? I mean, not as a laydown now,
Right,
you
yeah.
guys would be, okay, we'll talk, you wanna talk about separate? Or no?
What?
That's
It
okay.
doesn't
I
pertain
didn't
to
wanna,
anybody else.
yeah, yeah. I was just thinking as we can talk for a minute after this. But I think what we could do is we'll put some of this information together, and this is really meant to be open sharing. And if you have connections with any of these places, it would be great. We'll put out a spreadsheet and invite everyone to it, a Google spreadsheet. So this isn't meant to like stay in metabolic. It's definitely like we are a small but mighty team, and we'll try to do our best and kind of, you know, do as much as we can with all the other initiatives, but also would just like to keep the conversation going and figure out how we can all kind of rethink our resources and move things forward. So
Santa Monica is building a new community farm on 19th Street, and right now the lot is just all gravel.
That's what I was referring to. It's
Yeah.
through the community garden organization.
They have a ton of sites.
Yeah, there's like 5 or something.
great, we'll put it on there, and if you guys could give us the
Yeah.
contact.
I got one at
Well, I think well, first of all, I hope that we are convinced that there is merit to this as a framework. It's really hard to talk about soil and to sell it as something sexy and something that's really cool and part of the solution, but the reality of the situation is our climate crisis is only going to get worse, and we have to fundamentally modify how we operate and engage and organize our city. So we really look to you as leaders and experts within your spheres of influence to help us figure out how we can make this happen at a scale that addresses the problem, at the timeline that we need to operate in. But even if that doesn't end up panning out, we're literally navigating uncharted territory, and whatever ends up coming out of this convening is a step closer, right? So let's stay in contact, stay in communication, and let's try to make something happen. Yeah?